It's called a strongman podcast. And that term alone, when I posted it, triggered people. I wasn't expecting anybody to be bothered by me saying that. So when I say that to you, what even comes up for you about what a strongman is, or like that I see you as somebody that represents an archetype? What pops in your head? Because some people...
You're right, and it's shocking that the word strong has negative connotations now, because automatically we perceive strong to mean somebody that is domineering and controlling. Now, there are aspects of domination and control, but it's predominantly about oneself. So I'm completely in control of my thoughts, my feelings, my behaviors, and my decisions. And therefore, I'm in control of my life results. You could say that I'm a strong person. On the other hand, if I'm somebody who struggles with my thoughts, my feelings, my behaviors, my decisions, and therefore my life results, you can say that I'm somebody who is weak. But automatically people make the assumption that being strong is about dominating, having the upper hand over somebody else. So for me, being strong means that I don't want the upper hand on you, but you better not have the upper hand on me either. So it's about living independently and autonomously. And so for me, when we talk about strength, I also feel that it's the ability to embrace hardship. And the reason I talk about hardship, and again, this is considered to be a very old-fashioned concept, but I think a man's true masculinity is not revealed unless he has embraced a fair deal of hardship. So there's a wonderful saying, women thrive in comfort, but men are ruined by it. Now, some people might say that this sounds incredibly sexist, but the fact is there is a difference between the genders. And again, one of the areas where I feel that there's a lot of confusion is that men and women are equal, but they're different. Equal doesn't mean that they're the same. And I think it's in the differences where the chemistry happens. It's in the difference where the compatibility happens, where the attraction happens. And if we start to remove those differences, inadvertently what we're going to find is diminishing of chemistry. And what we're going to find is in countries where or cultures where people are pretending that the genders are not different, I feel that may inadvertently lead to a decline in birth rate because it diminishes the attraction between the genders. I mean, what I like about a woman, as an example, is her feminine side. And hopefully that's what she would see, the opposite in me. And I think that's where the polarity exists. So I think if we start to demonize the word strong, I think it removes a lot of the masculinity which inherently, genetically, and naturally women find attractive in men, but also is a characteristic that's required for a man to lead, whether he's leading at the community level, or he's living at the institutional level, or he's leading at the national level, or the family level. A man's got to lead as well. So I think without strength, you can't really do that. So I personally, I'm in favor of the word strong, and I love the fact that you've chosen that for your podcast.
Now, I have a father, I have an ex-husband, there is a man around, and there's certain things I feel like it's important, but as a woman, I need to teach him how I expect him to treat people and be in the world with my way of nurturing, with the way that you're not going to take that away from the way it's just inborn what women can do. We are the source of creation and life. But I had to say things like, this is going to sound kind of strange, honey, but you gotta need to learn how to grill and make a steak. And he wanted knives and he likes all the nature. And I started buying him knives and took him to a shooting range and doing all this stuff. People looked at me, I said, no, it's not about violence. This is a tool. It's an extension of himself. And it was a very different thing watching him becoming with learning skills that make him become more of an asset. And I said, I know it might sound sexist, honey, but there's things you're going to have to learn how to do as a man, because the world will not have a lot of tolerance for a man that is not capable of these basic skills in life. And he was like, wow. I'm like, no. Like, these little girls might do that play dumb thing and get people to do stuff for them. You can't get away with that. That won't be happening. So you better understand what your role is. And it is. I kind of just said the statement of, right now, I am bigger and stronger than you. And it is my job to protect you. And I will kill anybody in an instant that walks in this house. And I will not hesitate, nor will I feel bad to protect you or me. One day, the tables will turn. You will be bigger and you will be stronger than me. And that will become your job. You better be ready. So you need to stay fit, physically, mentally, and spiritually, and discipline yourself so you're ready for that. You better be able to throw me or your grandmother over your shoulder and get us out of a burning building. And he was like, And it was like 9 or 10. I said, so yeah, you want to learn how to box? He goes, yeah. Can I do? I said, absolutely. Let's go. And it became a very different moment for me, like to stop the sweet and the baby. Like I still do all that and the hugging and the kissing, but I went, right. I need to prepare you for this rite of passage. That it was hard for you to like, oh God, he's going to have a beard and have sex one day. I don't know if I'm ready for any of that. But I can't act like it's not happening. And a lot of my patients do. They're signing their boys up for yoga. And I'm like, what about boxing or wrestling, mama? Because he needs to know how to fight, actually. And that's a really interesting thing for women, because we want to protect our kids from violence so much.
Yep.
And not understanding the more prepared he is, the less likely he'll ever be to be in a violent situation because of the way he'll carry himself. Right. So anyway, that's where some of this came from with it.
I agree though, but paradoxically, it's the men who are not living and embracing their masculinity that tend to be the most resentful and most capable of then bitching and using all types of emotional manipulation tactics to try and control a woman, because that part of their side is not being nurtured, and they haven't had, in many cases, the ability to channel that masculinity through the types of physical compact sports that you're talking about. So what happens is that energy is suppressed, and it inadvertently becomes resentment energy. And you see, we have to think, biggest issue that we have is, even though we are intellectual now because of the way we are taught and conditioned, we're still very primitive as well. And that's one of the biggest challenges that we have, is that some of those primitive behaviors that cause attraction and contribute to attraction between the genders, those primitive behaviors from an intellectual point of view can be labeled as toxic. So you've got this tug of war between the behaviors. So as an example, and women will never admit to this, but if a man is inadvertently a little bit selfish, and he's a little bit stoic in terms of the fact that he is not fully engaged in emotional expressions, logically, she's going to try and recondition him and say, hey, you need to start expressing yourself more, right? Or you need to embrace your feminine side. So logically, she will say that these are the healthy behaviors, but primitively, she's not going to respond positively to those behaviors. But not only that, that stoicism, for example, a lot of people will say to me that, why don't you engage in a lot of expression? As you can see, you might look at my face and you might say, well, Ron is a kind of serious guy and he doesn't smile a lot. That's fine. I don't believe in demonstrations of high expressions and high emotions, because I believe that that's an expression of uncontrolled anxiety. So for me, the ability to be able to understand my emotions and manage my emotions is a positive characteristic, but it's interesting how the world will label that as a negative characteristic, not realizing that just because I'm not engaging in overt expressions of emotion doesn't mean that I don't understand my emotions, doesn't mean I don't know how to process my emotions. I just choose to demonstrate and express them sparingly. That's the choice I've made. But it's funny how society draws a conclusion. Any man that is not engaging in emotional expression, many times people will see that man as somebody who doesn't feel anything. He's cold, he's detached, or he's not emotionally intelligent. Well, that's not the case with all the men. A lot of men I know are very good at understanding emotion, processing emotion, but they choose not to engage in expression of emotion unless it's absolutely necessary, right? So this is where we have our intellectual side that tells us men should be in this particular way. But as you said, from a primitive perspective, we are still very primitive. As a species, the human race is still very primitive. We still have violence in the world. We still have deceit in the world. We still have all types of evil behavior in the world. We see it all the time. And somebody was saying to me the other day that, humans have killed more humans in the 21st century than the previous 20 centuries put together. So that shows us that, society is still not as safe as we would like it to be. And we can't just preach a message of safety and expect that people are going to embrace it. So there is a case that men need to have the ability to protect and defend, but that can only come from them nurturing their primitive side. The more they start to pretend that the primitive side doesn't exist, but they're going against biology. So the answer is not in denying the masculinity. It's about trying to integrate the masculinity with being civilized, not to give up the masculine behaviors. And I think this is where a very polarized view exists. And so what is happening is a lot of the times this message is sometimes coming from the feministic point of view. And it's well-meaning, obviously, it's well-intentioned. It's about helping men become better, but inadvertently it's actually having the opposite effect, because men are now even more confused than ever before. They're not stepping up, they're not taking up leadership responsibilities, they're not protecting, they're not defending, they're not becoming strong. So what's actually happening is, what we're starting to see in the Western world especially, is that women are becoming more and more frustrated because there's just not enough of those strong men out there that women are naturally attracted to, right? So what we're seeing is very high quality, high value women now that are single because the message that they were preaching is being interpreted the wrong way. There's a saying that if you're going to teach a fisherman how to fish, it's better to learn it from a fisherman rather than from the fish. What do I mean by that? Well, if you're going to teach men, a lot of that needs to come from responsible men who have demonstrated that they have the ability to be able to take care of their life's responsibilities, they're leading, and they're strong. And so we can't always have, and this is where I was saying to you at the beginning of the podcast, this particular point of view is going to be labeled controversial. But I make no apologies for the fact that there are some things that men can only learn from men. That's not to undermine the role of a woman. I think a woman has a very important role to play in a man's development. But I think there's a very strong case for the fact that there are some things that a man can only learn from a man, right? And just like some things that women can only learn from, I've got a daughter. There are things that I can never teach her, no matter how much I step up. I can never teach her certain things about her feminine nature, which is where she is naturally strong. So I think what we have to do is we have to stop pretending that men need to embrace their feminine side, or women need to embrace their masculine side for there to be more equilibrium. I don't think that that's the way it works. I think what needs to happen is men need to embrace more of their masculine side, women need to embrace more of their feminine side, and a lot of things will automatically take care of themselves.
What I love about, like, on your Instagram, and I'll have everything in the description for the listeners that you can get a hold of Ron's information and buy his books and all the things. I love how much you bring it, basically talking about multiple pillars of health, like saying, like, basically a full-bodied kind of man. Like, it's not just financial success, it's not just this, it's physical, spiritual, mental, it's all emotional, it's all of it. And the husband and father, and it's all of it, like leading and creating and building and having solutions. So I like that you on the side talk about eating well and meditating, and it's like, hey, there's more. You guys maybe think I'm all about the money. It's not. Why do you think I have so much money, or why do you think I'm leading? Because it's about being comprehensive. So dealing with these men and like, what are the biggest problems? Like, what would you say, one, for men? And then I want you to go down to, okay, then this is what I'm seeing these men having the biggest problems with. Do you have any solutions for how with the boys? Well, what should we be doing to stop so many men ending up like that?
Yeah. So we have, what we've done is we get a lot of young men, and we have to go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Some men are at such a primitive level right now where when you speak to them and you say, hey, what is it that you want in life? Typically they'll come up with three things. I want millions of dollars, I want a private jet, and I want lots of women. Right? So that's the men at the primitive level who none of their basic needs are met at this point. And so they're in that fantasy stage, and they're so desperate to prove themselves. On the other hand, we've also got men who consider themselves to be very evolved, but have given up a lot of their masculine behaviors. They've got a safe corporate job, they're family men, they spend a lot of time with their wives and their children, but a lot of it's actually coming from fear. If you really have experience in this space, you'll be able to see a lot of it's coming from this fear of being compliant and being seen as a good family man. They don't really have the guts to be able to pursue their own interests, right? A lot of them are concerned. And I've had friends, who've given up motorbike riding, who've given up boxing because their wives said that these are toxic behaviors and, that they need to stop hanging out. And what's wrong with you? You're a 40-year-old man, you're still going out with your friends drinking. And I think that the guys who have done that and they've abandoned their friends in order to please their women. I've been watching with quite, it's been interesting to observe. I'm finding that they have a lot of relationship issues anyway, right? So you don't give up parts of your masculinity. That's the whole idea. So what I'm seeing is a lot of these behaviors in the men who consider themselves to be quite evolved. They're actually operating from fear. They have this fear that they want society to see them as good family men. And I feel that they're more sort of conformity and compliance-based behaviors. And you know what? Here's the interesting thing. I don't think that women are going to reward those behaviors, because at the end of the day, and this is what I found, and I get sometimes I get men asking me for dating advice, and I say, I'm not a dating expert by any means, but you have to understand that sometimes when you go on the dating website, what women say they want and what they respond to are two different things. Especially if a woman is not evolved herself and she's not experienced and she's not in touch with her femininity. So you've got to look beyond. Can't just go by what she says she wants. You've actually got to test it, and you've got to push some boundaries to see. Now, this is where men get afraid, because they say, well, I don't want to push any boundaries because that makes me a bad guy. No, it doesn't. You've got to know the difference. You've got to know when to lead, when to dominate, and when not to dominate. But there are certain elements in a relationship you've got to have the courage to dominate. But the word domination also has such a negative connotation attached to it. So it's so that they would have these conversations now without somebody assuming, oh, you want to take control of me. No, I don't. I don't want to take any control of anybody, but at the same time, I don't want you to have control over me either. Let's have a relationship on an equal footing.
I think can you give some examples or talk about that? Because I think it's really important. And I've never heard somebody kind of phrase it that way. And this is a really important thing. And I tell you, as a mother of a boy, my son has that naturally. And I encourage it and nurture it. And people sometimes look, they're like, you took him to teach him to motorcycles at 8? He has knife throwing. He takes axe at 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, this is what he's interested in naturally. So I encourage it. Why would I want to instill fear and break his soul and his spirit and that primal masculine drive that I'm not doing it. Of course, it's a little bit scary. I'm his mother, but I also don't want a broken human as an adult, right? So I find a lot of women are not like me in that thinking, where they really want to overprotect because it's coming from that nurturing space, and they don't have men in their lives to help say, honey, it's okay. Let me take him out there and let's go do it. He needs to learn this. He needs to box or wrestle, to Aikido or, whatever. Like, they don't have that. They're by themselves. There's so many of us, like you said, that we've had to take on a very masculine role. And we're resentful over it. I don't care what any woman says. We're resentful. It's exhausting. It really is, right? So that's another lie we can all stop telling each other. Like, nobody wants to be in charge all the time. It's exhausting, right? And I don't think women were really designed for it. I don't have your testosterone levels. I don't have a 24, hour level cycle, and I'm forced to live in that type of hormonally driven world with no respect to my really complicated monthly cycle, where I'm not supposed to be actually behaving the same all month at all. I should be able to rest and recoup and be in comfort, like you said. It's important. Men are a little bit different. Go out there and go get the meat. It's not that complicated for you.
We thrive on that. Not saying that we don't need rest, but I just want to make a point about you said talking about submission and surrendering. If you look at the scriptures, and any major religion talks about the fact that why is it that religions propagate this message of women submitting to a man's authority? Well, the message is actually quite misunderstood. So here is how I think it's supposed to be. A man's first got to submit to God's authority, meaning that a man's got to embrace the way of the truth and wisdom first. So man's got to submit to God's authority first. Where a man has submitted to God's authority and he's naturally starting to acquire wisdom and leadership capability, that's when he has earned the right to expect a woman to submit to his authority. I don't think women need to submit to a man's authority unless he's submitted to the authority of God or wisdom. So I don't think that we should be placing this pressure that women have to surrender and submit to a man's authority. Well, if he's a wise man, if he's a strong man, if he's demonstrated his capability, then you automatically want to as a woman. You will never feel like it's something that you have to do out of obligation. You will actually feel that your natural feminine side will want to submit to a man's authority if he's that type of man. But if he's not that type of man and he hasn't gone through the hardship, he hasn't really pursued the truth and wisdom, and because to pursue wisdom and truth, you have to go through an immense amount of internal suffering and a lot of hardships. So if a man's avoiding that path and he is not submitting to the authority of God, he's not submitting to the authority of truth and wisdom, then the question then becomes, should a woman submit to his authority? And the answer is no. She may want to do it in a sexual context, but she may not want to do it in a real life context, right? So I just wanted to make that distinction. From my point of view, I have found that whenever I've seen examples of men who are strong and they have earned the right to lead, I have found that women naturally are happy to give up their authority and submit to those men. So it's not something that men should expect. It's something we have to earn. So that's one of the first things I would say. Now, this is where risk embracing behaviors come in, because you look at what's happening nowadays. Why is it that pornography consumption and video game consumption is so high? What is it telling us? The majority of the users of video games and pornography are men. Why? Because they're seeking an outlet to take risks, but they're too afraid now to take risks in the real world, so they're taking risks virtually. So you can't curb that behavior, because what's happened is, as we try to curb that risk appetite in men in the real world, all that's happened is it's channeled to the online world. But you haven't been able to curb it, because you look at, what Pornhub gets, 100 million hits a minute or something like that.
Wow.
Right? So what's it done? Has it changed men? It hasn't. The art writing is still the same. But now they're too afraid to do some of those things. The risk appetite is incredibly important, because without risk appetite, you don't develop risk management capabilities. You just become a risk avoider. And if you avoid risk, you avoid problems. You don't learn much. You don't become a master at any skill. You don't build anything, because everything requires the ability to embrace risk.